Good afternoon. Good afternoon. No, it's not. It's 3:33. Today is Tuesday, April 18th, 2017. This is the regular monthly meeting of the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee in Vets Hall. So I'd like to open the meeting, and we will begin with a moment of silence. Thank you. Rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody, for attending. We have a quorum present. All 7 members are present. And the first order of business will be to welcome our new member, Mr. John Martin. And I'll ask John he was recently appointed last week by City Council, and I would like to ask John to give a brief introduction. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Barbara. Hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to serve with you on this committee. My name is John Martin. I just recently retired in December from 23 years of public service. Most recently, I was 8 years as the general manager of a water district in Kern County. Got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in public administration. And now that I'm retired, I have a little bit of time to help out. So I'm very happy to be here and looking forward to the good work of this committee.
Thank you, John. We're happy to have you. Okay, so first order of business will be, are there any announcements from either our City Council liaison, Ms. Marlis McPherson, in the audience, welcome, or committee members? I'll start on the left. Bart, anybody? Don? John? Dave? Walter? Okay, so I have an announcement. Basically, I would like to summarize very briefly our City Council workshop last week, in which we discussed the work plan for the next year, so that we all have the benefit of that. I know some of you may have watched it on TV or attended, but I just want to briefly go over that. We discussed it at our last meeting, so this will just be very brief, and then we'll move on to public comment. Anyways, our work plan is somewhat brief. We only used 4 major items because they encompass a lot of work. The first item, the first goal, was in relationship to Measure Q, and it falls under the city goal of achieve economic and fiscal sustainability, as all of our items do. Number 1, review Measure Q revenues and expenditures for fiscal year 2016 to 17. That's the current fiscal year, prior to the end of this year, December 31st, for input and recommendations to City Council, usually in early January or February of 2018. Goal number 1. Our second goal in our work plan is budget transparency, and that is to continue progress on creating budget documents that are more easily understood by the general public. We are going to form a subcommittee, as I mentioned last month meeting, asked folks to think about who would serve on that. We will present ideas, the subcommittee, to the entire CFAC on innovative budget presentations, and then we will provide the city manager by January 2018 and City Council to influence budget preparations for the next fiscal year, 2018 to 19. Moving right along, the third item in our work plan is semi-annual reviews of the budget performance, investment portfolio performance, and contract expenditures, and prepare comments, if any, to present to City Council. That's a routine that we have been doing. And finally, the general fund budget reductions. This is a specific item, again, under Achieve Economic and Fiscal Sustainability. Review and make recommendations in coordination with city staff on options to cut at least $200,000 or more from the next year general fund budget that are either specific to the finance department or related duties or applicable citywide. So it's for us to initially think out of the box, come up with maybe some ideas ideas, work them with city staff to see if they're doable, presentable, and then I would ask the finance director, Mr. Schmolinger, to comment on that because he was with me when we interfaced with City Council last week. Go ahead, Craig.
So thank you, Craig Schmolinger with Finance. I think you did a great job of wrapping up what we talked about. Just following up a little bit on the last goal on there. So those budget reductions, we're looking into two specific areas like Barbara mentioned. I just think it's worth re-mentioning. So when we go look to achieve this goal, we know specifically what we're talking about, either operations and finances specifically related to the finance department as a whole, or as Barbara mentioned, citywide blanket things, labor, things like that, not to look into one individual contract specific to, parks or rec or something like that. So other than that, I think you did a great job.
Thank you. Okay. So with that stated, I will open it up now for public comment on any items not on today's agenda or any items on today's agenda for which those in the audience would like to comment but cannot stay to that agenda item. Please come forward, state your name. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Dorothy Cutter, and I have a very simple question that there should be a very simple answer to, and I would hope you would give it to me shortly because I have to leave soon. Okay. I have a lot of information that I've been getting from the city about the sewer plant, and my answer that I need is not in here. Okay. My question is, if I use 1 unit of water, what is the approximate cost, given all your different alternatives of costs, what would 1 unit of water cost me approximately each month, or 2 units, and so forth? So, do you have an answer for that, please?
This is public comment, and I don't have an answer off the top of my head. I'm not even sure the question was clarified, whether you meant today or the future.
Well,
that is on the agenda. We are going to be going through a detailed presentation on that, and I'm sure that it can be answered, or perhaps it's even in. I know I read the flyer you have. I don't know
and when would that be?
We're just going to. I think we may have to rearrange the agenda items. So, thank you for your comment, and we will.
Are you going to answer when that would be?
We're trying to figure that out. It's supposed to be item B2.
Okay. Well, I have to leave, so I was wondering, you don't have a date?
Oh, no, today. We're going to discuss that today, and I think we may be able, if we can't answer your question today, I'm sure somebody here can get back to you.
Do you know how long that would be before you would answer that? I mean, like...
I'll direct the question to the Public Works Director, Mr. Livack.
Okay.
Thank you.
The question was, I think the way I understand it was, how much will the sewer rates be if a person uses 1 unit of water? The current strategy for sewer rates is, for residential, is a fixed cost, so it's not based on variability of water use. And as you saw in the staff report, it does, I don't know how much we want to get into discussion on this item, probably not a whole lot, but they're high costs, and we'll be talking about those a little bit later.
Well, I think we've answered the question. It's not a per unit cost, and it will be based on some other things that we're going to go into a lot more detail. So I think it would be appropriate after that presentation. You can, if you can't stay, ma'am, you can view this on AGP.
Also, a similar presentation will be held tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. at the Public Works Advisory Board, again at the next City Council meeting, and then the first WRF meeting in May also will have real similar presentations.
Okay, thank you. The City Council meeting is next Tuesday.
Okay,
thank you. Any other public comment? All right, thank you. And just so we understand the process, because we haven't had a lot of public comment at these meetings, and we also haven't had a lot of presentations, but the process basically would be we will follow the agenda item. The staff is doing a presentation on at least one of the agenda items, so we will all receive that staff item presentation. Then our committee will ask any questions specifically related to that staff presentation. Then we will go to public comment on each item, and then our group will should go to discussion after we've had the benefit of the presentation, questions and answers, and public comment. So if that's acceptable to everyone, that's the process I believe the City Council follows as well.
Can I just a clarification about when these meetings are televised? I know they go on YouTube. So for audience members could share with their friends that aren't here. How long after the meeting do these go on YouTube generally? Like a week, 2 weeks?
Sometimes it's right away.
In
Month?
general,
Yeah.
roughly a week. That's what we aim for.
Okay.
Sometimes not that quickly, but we aim for a week.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good clarification. Sometimes I've seen them up there quicker.
Right.
And they're also televised right now, too, is the other thing. So, okay, thank you. All right, so that takes us to the consent calendar. Item A1, approval of the minutes from the March 21st, 2017 regular CFAC meeting. Any comments, questions, or updates before we move to approve these? Can we have a motion to approve?
I move that we approve.
All right, John Irwin has moved that we approve the minutes from the March 21st, 2017 meeting.
Madam Chair, Walter Heath, I second.
Thank you, Walter. Second by Walter. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, thank you, everybody.
Barbara, if I may, the gentleman who will be here for the item B1, the rate study, unfortunate the lady who just spoke wasn't here currently, but we can likely keep item B1 at the front of the agenda and then move forward.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's too bad. She just left. Okay. Okay, so thank you. If you are ready to present, we will move to item B1, and that is a staff presentation of the most recent findings from the draft sewer and water rate study update. And Craig, who will be presenting that? Can you introduce our speaker? Or Rob?
Yeah, I can jump in really quickly. So this traditionally would not be a CFAC specific item, and it's not intended to be. Mm-hmm. So there's also the WRF, so the Water Reclamation Facility Advisory Committee, who specializes in a lot of the stuff that goes into the actual rate study. So I'll kind of kick it over to Rob for a little bit just to kind of give an overview of the intent of bringing it in front of CFAC. So here's Rob Leivick, the Public Works Director.
Thank you.
Thank you. Committee members, Chair. There's a couple reasons for bringing this in front of CFAC. One is more public exposure regarding that, and then getting your input on financing strategies and rate implementation strategies. So we have a couple of options near the end of the report regarding how the rate should be implemented timing-wise, and whether it should be rates or whether a portion should be on the property tax. First, Eileen Shields is going to give an overview presentation on the project itself and walk us through a little bit of detail for background purposes on the project and on the water reclamation plan. And then we have Alex Handlers from Barlow & Wells, our rate consultant, who will walk us through the rate study. One of the reasons that you don't have the study before you right now is our city attorney offered an opinion late last week regarding where the rates should be placed, whether they are all sewer rates or his opinion was that component of the project that is beyond the minimum treatment for disposal and is for water supply benefit needs to be placed on the water rates. So late last week, we had kind of a retooling of our study, and Bartle & Wells, our rate consultant, had to do some additional work to accommodate the city attorney's opinion on that. So that's why you don't have the rate study in hand, and we will have that as soon as possible. I'm going to turn it over to Eileen Shields, engineer with MKN and Associates, and project manager for the water reclamation study, and she's going to walk us through some background and project alternatives.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. Again, my name's Eileen Shields. I'm with MKN and Associates, and we're the program managers for the Water Reclamation Facility Project. I've been serving as the assistant program manager and also was the primary author for the Master Water Reclamation Plan. And I'll give you a little bit of background. Today, I'm going to go over the goals for the presentation, review the community project goals for the Water Reclamation Facility Program. I'll give you a little background on the project, and then we'll go over the status, the WRF Program Overview, what project we're looking at, and the recommended projects that came out of the preliminary, the master planning documents, both the facility master plan and the water reclamation plan. And then Alex is going to cover the preliminary rate study findings, and we'll end with some questions and answers and comments, I'm sure. So the goals for today, we'd like the committee to receive the update on the draft rate study, ask any questions, provide some input, and namely provide input regarding the project financing alternatives and the rate implementation options that Alex is going to review. So there's been a lot of several years of planning and early work with a culmination of community outreach and various studies. And somewhere early on in the process, the city, through that community outreach and some workshops that were performed, developed the WRF project community goals. And these have really been the basis for all of our for the facility master plan, namely, and the master water reclamation plan, looking at what project can we put forth that's going to meet those community goals for the project. And one of the main ones is produce tertiary disinfected wastewater. And the water reclamation facility preliminary design and everything in the facility master plan has been designed to do that. Produce reclaimed wastewater cost effectively. The master water reclamation plan looks at the feasible recycled water alternatives and develops a budget for that, for those alternatives. Including reclamation as early as possible can reduce your long-term costs. It's basically putting it all together in one program. Doing that construction earlier is going to save in potential inflation. Allow for on-site composting. This was an early goal. Look at beneficially reusing the biosolids that are a byproduct of wastewater treatment. And the facility master plan looked at that goal and determined that they wouldn't recommend on-site composting for potential odor issues and neighborhood compatibility, and then also cost effectiveness. They determined that a regional facility is going to be more cost effective, so trucking those off to be composted with other facilities' biosolids. Design for energy recovery, that's mainly covered in the facility master plan, and the potential to do solar facilities perhaps, or I think they looked at digestion as well to do energy recovery. Design to treat for contaminants of emerging concern. That's included in the facility master plan, treatment evaluation, and they looked at some of the most cutting-edge technologies and the various treatment alternatives that could address this. Allow for other municipal uses at the water reclamation facility site, and the site planning and facility master plan looks at that, potential for other municipal uses. And it was mainly done for looking at what kind of space requirements might be needed. It's not included in the budget for the project, other municipal uses. Ensure compatibility with neighboring land uses. So this was a big goal that really came into play during the siting studies and looking at where might this water reclamation facility be placed and where is going to be a good site both for the city and looking at our costs and being near infrastructure and considering the neighborhood and potential impacts to those neighboring land uses. Currently, the facility master plan looks at this goal for the architecture considerations and how you're going to place the different facilities on the site. And the EIR is going to look at that further in the alternatives assessment. And finally, I think the last goal listed here is operational within 5 years. This was a goal from the City Council, both to address the potential changes to the permit and get this project done in a timely fashion to save on costs. We're on schedule currently for the WRF program completion and being operational by 2021. And with these early studies that we've been doing and some of the groundwater modeling, the Master Water Reclamation Plan puts forth that this recycled water program is the project is feasible to be completed with the WRF program and do it concurrently. So going back, providing a little background on the timeline, the existing wastewater treatment plant is jointly owned by the city and the Cayucas Sanitary District and treats wastewater from both communities. It's an aging facility. I think it's 62, 63 years old now, and they developed some plans to upgrade the facility to address both the aging infrastructure and the anticipated permit requirements and effluent requirements that are going to be coming down the road. The plant currently operates on a 301H waiver, which is to say that during periods of high flows and wet weather, they are permitted to discharge less than secondary treated effluent to the ocean because the plant can't physically handle the full flow during high wet weather. And that waiver is going to be going away very soon. And so there were some upgrades, some plans that were put together to address this and upgrade it at the current site. In January 2013, the California Coastal Commission denied the coastal development permit to perform those upgrades at the site, and that opened up this siting study process and looking at where else can we put this treatment plant, and if we're going to put it at a new site, what do we want the project to include? What are our goals for the project? In May 2014, the site options report, in December of 2013, the site options report looked at 17 different sites, everywhere from the Chevron Toro Creek site between the city and Cayucas down to the current site, which is the South Bay Boulevard site, and several options in the Morro Valley and Chorro Valley. They narrowed it down to 7 sites, and the council moved to compare the best sites both in the Morro Valley and in the Chorro Valley. We looked at a lot of different options. We had recommended a location in the Morro Valley. And we also looked at options to do a regional facility with the California Men's Colony. And December 2014, we determined that wasn't very desirable because of costs and logistical challenges. And the council decided to focus on the Morro Valley. In April 2015, Cayucas Sanitary District decided to pull out of the project and pursue their own water reclamation facility project. And then, so the city started focusing on a facility that was going to be operational for the city of Morro Bay. The facility master plan still has an appendix that addresses the potential for Cayucas to join the project and to have a facility that will treat flows for both communities. We did some additional siting studies that were born basically out of neighborhood concerns, citizen concerns about siting a facility in the Morro Valley. The preferred location at that time was the Rigetti property, and there are some neighborhoods near that site. And so the City Council looked back at what would be the cost for some other sites in the Morrow Valley. Let's take a closer look at the South Bay Boulevard site. And we did some additional reports, which led to kind of balancing what's the most achievable project in that 5-year timeline, looking at some potential logistical challenges and balancing the cost impacts of going between the Morrow Valley and what ended up being the next most favorable location, South Bay Boulevard. And with all those considerations, in June of 2016, the City Council selected the South Bay Boulevard site for detailed studies, and that's what was put forth for the facility master plan and this master water reclamation plan, and is now being further studied in the EIR. So with that, that opened up and allowed us to move forward with all the technical studies, the biological, cultural, geotechnical studies, surveys. We had an EIR scoping meeting. Notice of preparation went out in August of 2016. A memo of understanding with the property owner for the South Bay Boulevard was executed in October of 2016. The facility master plan was completed in November of 2016, and the master water reclamation plan was just completed in March of 2017. Draft EIR is expected to be released in August, and final certification in fall of this year. So we plan to award contract for the WRF project, which is anticipated to be a design-build contract in May of 2018. Begin project design shortly thereafter. Construction scheduled to start in June of 2019 and be completed in May of 2021. So with all these preliminary studies, some of the main points, what we know now, we can build a water reclamation facility at the South Bay Boulevard site that's going to meet the community project goals. A total WRF project, meaning the water reclamation facility and a recycled water project, is feasible to be completed in 2021. Groundwater injection and extraction to supplement the city's water supply appears feasible. We've done a lot of hydrogeological studies and preliminary modeling looking at the Morrow Valley groundwater basin. And a total WRF project can provide recycled water for groundwater injection to supplement the city's water supply, provide water independence, reduce reliance on imported water for the city, which increases reliability of supply. And some of the advantages of accelerating a recycled water project, it allows for some more eligibility for grant monies by incorporating that recycled water project. There's a lot more opportunities for that. There's the long-term construction cost savings, of course, and you have the potential to reduce your state water use earlier than if you delayed that recycled water project component. Getting to the costs, and I'll provide some slides that show how we got to these numbers, but just to get it up front, because I know it's a big question for a lot of people. We looked at several alternatives in the Master Water Reclamation Plan, and we came up with a total program cost incorporating both the WRF and the recycled water component of between $153 million to $168 million. We also looked at what we call the no recycled water project, or alternative zero, just to provide a baseline for that, and we're estimating $124 million. So there's a lot of background, a lot of information in the Master Water Reclamation Plan. I'm not going to go over all of that because I think it's important to talk about the rate study update. We looked at several different recycled water opportunities and narrowed it down to a handful of feasible recycled water projects for the community. And we basically have, we have four main alternatives that we studied and detailed and developed budgets for. And those include the alternative zero that I mentioned previously, the no recycled water project. Alternative one looks at urban reuse. Two It's titled Agricultural Exchange, and I'll summarize that in a moment. And then alternatives 3 and 4 are indirect potable reuse alternatives, and they're presented here together because they're very similar, varying only by the general location for the injection wells. And after we got through the evaluation, we determined that the cost came out comparably within a couple $100,000 of each other. So very briefly, the No Recycled Water Project envisions a water reclamation facility at the South Bay Boulevard site. It would be a secondary disinfected plant designed only to meet the requirements for ocean discharge. It doesn't meet the community project goals for producing tertiary disinfected recycled water or a water reclamation component. And therefore there's no potential water supply benefit for this option. But we felt it was important, again, to provide a baseline and what would be required to meet those effluent requirements for ocean discharge. This map shows the wharf at the South Bay Boulevard site in purple, and the pipeline that runs along the western alignment, which was recommended in the facility master plan, out to the existing ocean outfall near the wastewater treatment plant. And the anticipated budget for this project would be $104.2 million. There's a construction contingency that's, we're recommending a contingency of 25% of the construction cost subtotal. And so we have a total program cost opinion of $124 million. Let me summarize really quickly what I'm including as a total program cost. We have the anticipated construction costs for your water reclamation facility, all the pipelines, the lift station, all your construction dollars. It also includes property acquisition for the South Bay Boulevard site. It includes design, construction management. We have an allowance for permitting, environmental mitigation, and monitoring. I always leave one thing out. I'm trying to remember. I should have had it listed. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Decommissioning of the existing wastewater treatment plant and the city's portion of that, because we're assuming Cayucas would be responsible for a portion of that as well. That's it. Yeah. And then a 25% construction contingency to bring us to the total program cost. Alternative 1 considers urban reuse. So what's the potential to offset the existing city's potable water demand by using recycled water for approved uses such as commercial reuse or irrigation at businesses or agricultural irrigation is primarily discussed in the next alternative, but we looked at potential industrial uses, and we looked at all the previous recycled water opportunities that were reviewed in historical documents and considered the pipeline route and chose some users that were near that pipeline route. There's going to be anticipated additional treatment required for salts removal. There's high salts in the current wastewater, and this alternative really only penciled out to potential water supply benefit of 45 acre-feet per year. We also looked at providing a pipeline to the county golf course, but since they're not a potable water user currently from the city, they use non-potable water from a well. That wouldn't count towards reducing the city's potable water demand. Summarizing the cost opinion, we have a subtotal program cost of about $129 million, and with a 25% construction contingency, we have $153 million for this alternative. The next main alternative is agricultural exchange. This really looks at the agricultural land on Highway 41. It's been identified historically as the most promising recycled water opportunity, but since those users are outside the city's water service area and don't use potable water from the city. We envisioned, in order to make it attractive for the city to provide recycled water to those users, in exchange of potable water back from those properties and those landowners who are participating in the program. To make it attractive to the landowners, however, you're looking at a reduced ratio. We'd be providing them with more recycled water than they would be returning in groundwater. And for the sake of the evaluation, we assumed a 2-to-1 ratio or 0.5 return rate. Again, you'd need additional treatment for salt removal to provide quality that would be acceptable. And this is anticipating a potential water supply benefit of 442 acre-feet per year. And the total program cost of opinion, including the construction contingency, is $168 million. Alternatives 3 and 4 is the indirect potable reuse alternative. And this envisions injection wells down in the lower Morrow Valley, somewhere near the intersection of Highway 41 and Highway 1. There's 2 potential pipeline routes, depending on where those injection wells get sited, on what side of the highway they are. The treatment would be full advanced treatment, reverse osmosis, and advanced oxidation in order to meet the permitting requirements for groundwater injection. And we're estimating a potential water supply benefit of between 940 and 1,200 acre-feet per year, or 1,100 acre-feet per year. Total program costs, including the construction contingency, is $167 million. So summarizing those cost opinions, we're looking at $124 million for a no recycled water project, up to $168 million for agricultural exchange, or $167 million for indirect potable reuse. We also looked at annual costs. This table summarizes the anticipated annual cost. If you take that program cost and annualize it over the year, add in the estimated operation and maintenance costs for both the water reclamation facility and the recycled water components. I've also included an estimated annual water cost, since we're talking about a potential water supply project, potential water supply benefit to the city. And there's some assumptions here that would need to get further investigated. But for the no recycled water project, we're assuming $2.6 million based on estimated demand of 1,200 acre-feet per year. Just to give you an idea, I think the city's 2015 water demand was about 1,100 acre-feet. We estimated state water projects would fulfill that demand for the no recycled water project. The city currently relies mainly on the state water project since they have a take-or-pay contract. You can see the urban reuse alternative reduces that cost just slightly because we're reducing we're offsetting some of the potable water demand, 45 acre-feet per year, with recycled water. Agricultural exchange assumes about half of that water would come from state water, and the rest would be no cost from the ag landowners. And then indirect potable reuse assumes that the majority of your water would be supplied by groundwater from the Morrow Valley. It would be injected through the recycled water project, extracted, a minimum travel time distance downstream, which we've verified through preliminary modeling, and then treated at the city's existing water treatment plant. So if you consider all those factors, we're looking at an annual cost between $10.3 and $12.4 million, or a spread of about $2 million between the various alternatives. So getting to the conclusions and recommendations, the Master Water Reclamation Plan recommends the indirect potable reuse alternative based on the community project goals and to produce reclaimed water providing the highest and most reliable potential water supply benefit between 900 and 1,100 acre-feet per year, which is near the city's current water demand. And the city can significantly reduce or eliminate reliance on imported water. The least expensive alternative, obviously, is the no recycled water project, followed by urban reuse. But alternative 0, your no recycled water project, provides no water supply benefit, and alternative 1 provides the least potential water supply benefit. Alternative 0, additionally, does not meet the community project goals. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alex Handlers to go over the rate study update.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, can I ask a question about the plant?
Hang on, please. Eileen, would you mind, if it's okay, would you mind staying up there? I think we may have some questions
Sure.
before we go to the next topic. Thank you. All right, Walter, go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm wondering if you could walk me through the process of selecting the sequential batch reactor. How is it determined? What are the components of a sequential batch reactor, and how is the size determined, and what are the options in terms of the sizes of sequential batch reactors you might have? We might have available to us. And the relevance of this, the reason I'm asking about this is that the size of the tank and the size of that room, it's determined by how large a unit we need, and that could have an effect on the construction of the plant and the construction costs of the plant.
That's something that can be answered easily, or?
I think we could take a stab at that, and if I start stumbling, I'm sure Mike will jump in. Mike Nunley is here. He's the program manager for the water reclamation facility. So just to clarify one point, it might not be what you're asking, but the facility master plan reviews several different treatment alternatives and ended up recommending 2 basic alternatives that would meet the community project goals for the project and produce tertiary disinfected recycled water. One is the sequencing batch reactor, followed by disc filters, and there's some primary treatment and some disinfection involved there as well, but for the core biological treatment and filtration. And then the other is membrane bioreactors, which basically combine the secondary and tertiary treatment, or the secondary biological treatment and your filtration. So I just want to make that point that SBR has not been selected,
Right.
but it's, okay.
Yeah. So SBR and MBR are both live at this point?
Yes.
Yeah. But could you tell me a little bit more about the sequencing batch reactor situation?
Yeah, I'll probably ask Mike to jump in on that. And the sizing is all based on the flows and a detailed flow analysis.
Right.
But,
I get that part.
yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Nunley. So the sequencing batch reactor, how that works is it's batch treatment, meaning you have a series of tanks that will fill. The first tank might fill, will act as a clarifier, and after a period of a couple of hours, then the top water will be drained off into the next tank. And then in that tank, there will be an aeration system to aerate and activate the sludge. And so it's an activated sludge process, but the reason it's called a sequencing batch reactor is because you have these sequential batch operations that happen, as opposed to a lot of treatment facilities that are pass through, like or more like continuous flow. Like the city's current facility, the trickling filter plant is not a batch process, meaning as flow comes in, it goes through the clarifier, it travels over a weir, goes into the trickling filter, goes through another clarifier, and so it just continues to flow. So in a sequencing batch reactor, it's the first batch of wastewater that comes in over several hours is clarified. Then it's sent over to a biological reactor. As the next several hours of wastewater comes in, it's going to a second tank or a second train of tanks. So that's basically how that process works. It is activated sludge, meaning It's similar to like a lot of, it's a conventional secondary treatment process, meaning it has aeration and you recirculate bugs back into the system to try to get a higher level of treatment in a small footprint. But that's one of the benefits of sequencing batch reactors is it's a highly automated process, but by it being a highly automated process, you can the philosophy is you can build less concrete, not be as conservative with how big your basins are.
Thank you, Mike.
If I could just follow up. So then you're talking about then the size of the tanks, and you're talking about some equipment as well. But is the equipment rated according to flows, or is it pretty much a standard piece of equipment that would work regardless of the sizes of the tanks?
Everything is really designed to meet your design flows and loads. So a lot of this equipment's modular equipment, kind of like when you buy pumps. Blowers are a certain, it's a certain set sizes you pick from for blowers. When it comes to the sequencing batch reactor, they're going to be kind of optimal sizes that vendors are going to want to provide that do the control systems and that sort of thing. So
yeah, and that's where my concern is in terms of the sizing of it. Mm-hmm. So how is it determined? What size should be specified for our WRF?
So in the facility master plan, what Black & Veatch did is they took your historical flows and loadings over the last several decades, and then they also looked at what the potential was for, based on your historical growth rates, what your population projections were and what the number of hotels and everything might be out 2030. And then they took those numbers and actually it's out to 2040, I believe. And then they took those projections and that's what they used to size those facilities based on industry standards. They also did some treatment process computer modeling to optimize those sizes so nothing was too big or too small.
Okay.
Excuse me.
And then and I'll wrap this up. Just one more question. I had experience in my work life with fermentation and downstream processing of E. coli cells.
Go ahead.
And so what I'm getting to here is looking at your flow data. I think that anything previous to 2013 pretty much can be disregarded. There's a lot of error in those in that data that would probably cause it to be tossed out in the scientific world. Not enough data points, the fudge factor on the inflow meters between the two different styles of inflow meters, and the fact that we're in a different world now with respect to water conservation and even the technologies going forward. So I still have some concerns in terms of the sizing of the tanks, the amount of flows that we're anticipating here. And I understand that you have to allow for a margin of error because there are times in any given hour where you might have 7 times normal flows. And I get that. Mm-hmm. So, we have to accommodate that. But I would like you guys to really take a closer look at whether the size of the tanks are appropriate, the size of the building that houses the tanks is appropriate, mm-hmm. because everything else, if you do the SBR process, everything else downstream is going to be affected by that as well, and you're talking about some pretty expensive membranes.
If I can jump in real quick, Mike. Walter, if I may, great questions. There's great engineering-related things that are probably better tuned towards a WRF-CAC meeting or another project meeting. Just want to make sure we're focusing on the overall financial components of that.
I want to put it out there, though, because I want the public to kind of understand, in just kind of real layman's terms, what we're confronting here and maybe be in a position to ask some of these questions themselves.
And Walter, we want to encourage questions, but the other thing is we have to balance that with, just like I didn't want to get into a question and answer session with the public comment on answering, I want to follow the agenda. We've encouraged our members to submit these in writing, and we'll get them in the notes, and then that might help Mike and company be better prepared to address them. The purpose, our agenda items here, we have a scheduled speaker. We want to get to the sewer rate and ask those kind of questions.
I'm done now. Yeah.
Okay,
Right,
thank you. So any other questions, that's fine, but let's not, I don't want to get into the weeds on an engineering study that would be more appropriately addressed to the WRF.
I'd like
Go ahead,
to
John.
throw in, have concerns, like Rob and I had talked about peaking study, or the peaking factor and I&I studies and how that would affect costs too. Mm-hmm. And, you had to pick a number in order to go, which I assume is the historical number. But would there be any savings for the project too if we implemented an I&I program?
The peaking factor is about 7, so we're looking at a peak hour flow rate of 7 times what the average is. Much of it is due to inflow, so rainwater flowing into the system is what is causing that. So old leaking pipes and water coming in through manholes, or stormwater coming into the collection system. Anything that we do to reduce the amount of stormwater coming into the system impacts the sizing of the large lift station that we're going to have to pump the sewage up to the South Bay Boulevard site, and will influence the equalization. So we have another process going on right now called our One Water Plan. It's basically one of the components is a sewer system master plan, and they'll be looking at I&I over this the first portion of this project, and be feeding into the final design of the facility. So we're going to try to take advantage of, we have flow meters in the ground right now to catch these late season rains, and so that we can know where most of the leakage into the system is occurring. So yes, reduction in I&I does reduce the overall size of the project and can influence costs.
And we have a plan in order to potentially capture those savings, right?
Yes, we do.
Mm-hmm.
I just to make sure, decommissioning is now in the number.
Yes, sir.
Solar is not, which we may or may not do, but it's not there.
Solar is not, but one option with solar could be to enter into a power purchase agreement where somebody builds the solar for you and you pay them a reduced power cost.
Okay,
so it would not necessarily have to be a capital project, but it's not in the numbers right now.
Like it's a separate discussion cost trade-off. The service yard is, as stated clearly, not there, and if it were to be added, that would be part of some other financial arrangement outside of the water sewer. And the last thing, and I think it was clarified when she was going through the re-injection, it was like this could be done, but when you got to the actual numbers for alternatives 3 and 4, what I heard was the whole McGill is in there. So the thing to make it work and get everything, it's all in the numbers. Is there anything not in the numbers? Are there any assumptions you've made to say, well, we didn't include something? It's all there, and there's no more surprises.
That's a good question. Everything we've identified that would be part of the project, pipelines, lift station, the city's part of decommissioning of the plant, property acquisition, allowances for permitting, everything we could quantify or put a budget to is in there. If there are the only items, if something that what contingency is for on projects is contingency is for what you don't know. And so contingency would be if we got into some really odd situation and had excessive rock excavation in an area that had never shown up on a geotech report or something before, or some, and would it occupy 19 to 20 million? No, but the contingency's there to account for the things we don't know are there. Everything we know we'd face on the project is in there.
One editorial comment that I've made, and I've gotten tied up before, contingency will be spent. So no one should look at contingency as if, well, if we don't run into rock, maybe we won't spend it. Contingency is put there by estimators to get to a 50% probability point. So I would even suggest you don't even put a line that says contingency, because it leads people to think that it's some sort of a slush fund, and it's not. It is literally part of the estimate. It's intended to be spent. There's an equal chance of going over the number with contingency as going under the number. But this confuses literally everybody. When they hear this, contingency will be spent. Because if that weren't the case, we'd be back at $85 million right now. When it was discussed earlier, when contingency was there. Anyway, contingency, you assume it's going to be spent. Don't know how or why, but it will, because things come up.
Then maybe our recommendation when we get to that point would be to delete some of the contingencies and put some incentive in there not to spend those or come back with additional justification for increased costs.
No. Contingency, estimators are viewed as sort of a lower class citizen. They know how to come up with the most probable cost. The way you get there, just if you build a house for yourself, you have a contingency. And I'll guarantee you, anybody who's built a house and had an estimate with contingency, you spent it. It was spent for legitimate things. So that's a whole different discussion if you want to put an incentive on than contingency. Contingency is there to get you to a 50% probability cost for the project, exclusive of any incentives or something you might want to put on.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Well, just first, thank you for the historical view. I think that's going to be helpful to our citizens to see how much time and money has been spent to get to this part. But way back at the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned municipal uses. And I was just wondering if you could clarify or give examples.
So when the project was originally, I think, conceived, or when a lot of the community workshops occurred starting in 2013, 2014, one of the areas that the community identified they had some interest in was, depending on where the site might be located, is possible reuse of the site for other uses. Ideas that were thrown out were things like, and this was way early on in the project, but we've carried it through because it was a community goal to consider as we looked at options. One of the goals, there'd been talk about a community park. There'd been talk about co-location of the public works facilities there with the water and sewer. There was, I think there was talk of an education center. That was one that was kind of we went back and forth on quite a bit. And in the end, the direction from council that we got was priority was build a wharf. That some of these sites didn't really lend themselves toward those other items. I don't think, for example, there wasn't a tremendous amount of interest in the public education facility, locating that at a plant site, because security can be tricky and that sort of thing. So
is cost for some of those possibilities included, or that would be a whole separate?
Those would be separate.
Okay.
They're not included.
One of the purposes of carrying those forward with the project are to be included in the CEQA document, so the environmental review, so that if those uses are decided that they're needed to be moved to that location, they're covered in that CEQA document. So it accommodates. The word that's commonly used is our city corp yard. So we'll have water and wastewater facilities planned out there, but moving, for example, our streets and parks maintenance facilities out to there, because maybe you know or you don't know, we're a fairly small crewed city, and we work together an awful lot. So having the same people that work together at the same site has its advantages, and we share equipment with each other. So that was one of the probably the most probable options that would be carried forward, is the city's corporation yard to move all those facilities out there. Just to be quite frank, if we don't move the corporation yard to the water reclamation facility, at some point in time we have to look at a new corporation yard, because I don't know how many people have seen our corporation yard. It is original city and corporation construction, and it's old metal buildings on the coast. They don't really last that long. So it's ready to be replaced.
So just to be abundantly clear, the costs for something like that would not be rolled into water, sewer type of...
They can't be in the water and sewer rates. They're general fund items, and we'd have to find another funding method for those.
Thank you.
And then I had one last question. Does the estimate that you based your costs on include a list of potential risks, both positive and negative, and their probability of happening?
Yeah, part of what we're working through now in anticipation of this design build solicitation on the WRF is the risk registry. So we're working through that. We're working through that now.
How far along are you on the risk registry?
It's something we'll have released when we're going to release the RFQ in June for design builders. That's the current schedule, so we'll have it ready before then.
And what's the process for managing the risks on that registry? You're always watching to see if there's a positive or negative impact?
Yeah, and part of what we do too is it also helps us communicate to the potential proposers, what the risks are from their perspective too. It also helps us decide what the cities, who's best to handle the risk for things like permitting. Right now the permitting is in the hands of the city, because the city's in a better position to manage permitting risk than a contractor coming in doing design build. So it's going to be actively managed all the way through, and that's part of our job.
Thank you.
Thank you. So any further? Go ahead, John. That's okay.
So the cost estimates for the two IPR alternatives includes 30% for engineering and administration. It seems like a high number, particularly for a design-build type contract. Can you comment on that?
Sure. So the 30% for the admin and engineering, and I might bring Eileen up to provide some more detail on this, but we have 30% right now assigned to particularly to the recycled water part of it, and which is about $25 million or so of the overall of the overall cost, or $28 million. And so we have about 30% assigned there for engineering and admin, just because engineering, construction management, all that sort of thing. On those elements, we don't have that as well defined as we do the main wharf. For example, on the main water reclamation facility, we have the design engineering is about 8%. So it's broken out differently for the different aspects of the project.
And all that can be found in which document?
So the master reclamation plan includes all of the breakdown of for the recycled water elements, and then there's a ton of detail in facility master plan.
Both of which are on the website.
Both of which are on the website. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, John. So I think we're ready to move on then to Mr. Handler's presentation on the rate study update. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad I made it in time. I thought the meeting was at 6 o'clock until I got a call to hustle down here. So you just heard about the project and the project costs. It's a big impact. And what we're doing with the rate study is trying to translate what does that mean to the ratepayer here in Morro Bay. And for a little background on the sewer rates, your water and sewer utilities, they're self-supporting enterprises. They don't rely on property taxes. Most of the money comes from sewer rates for your sewer enterprise. So you have to have the rates set adequately to support the financing of the plant as well as the operations, et cetera. The big swing in the potential rate impacts comes down to a couple things. One is, what's the project alternative? We evaluated the projects under the baseline scenario, as well as up to the $167 million indirect potable reuse scenario. And the other big factor that could swing things is what type of financing you get. On one hand, we looked at what is the best type of financing, which would be state revolving fund loans, potentially supplemented by WIFIA, Financing Water Infrastructure Financing Improvement Act, funds that a lot of agencies are going for now for big projects like this. Who knows? It was just a process that was just a preliminary application, was just submitted last week. So those are favorable. The state revolving fund loan program is half the state's GO bond rate. It's currently 1.8% for a 30-year financing, equals about 25 to 30% grant financing. The WIFIA program is a little different. They will allow loan repayment terms of up to 35 years at a rate that's roughly equivalent to the Treasury rate, kind of the average Treasury rate for the term that you take out. And no question about this, you all know this is a very expensive project. It's going to be a very big impact, and we'll show you what the rates look like in a second. The background is, we were just here a few years back. I think I recognize some of you from prior meetings. Did a rate study looking out 5 years and trying to gradually move your sewer rates in the right direction to fund what we previously thought is what the project looked like. And that looked like a $75 million project with Cayucos contributing 25%, so your share was down to less than $60 million. We also assumed low-rate state revolving fund loan financing when we did that study as well. Obviously, those rate increases aren't going to be near enough. So in the past, you were between 55 to 60 million of project cost. Now you're between 124 to 167. So that's multiples of what it used to be. And this isn't even including cost inflation. So I'll show you the numbers that look like with cost inflation in a moment. So what did we do as part of our study? We went back in, we updated all the financial projections with the latest, greatest information available. We try to err a little on the conservative side with our assumptions for financial planning purposes. So for example, we didn't assume that you'd be able to get the current state revolving fund loan rate because it's near historical lows right now. We assumed something a little bit higher, still reasonable, but trying to err a little on the conservative side. We didn't assume there'd be a ton of growth. We assumed a little bit of growth. We assumed cost inflation of 4%, for example. We assumed that Cayucos would be ending their contributions to the treatment plant starting in a few years. After 2018-19 is when they say they're going to have their facility up and running, and they'll be pulling out of your system. The unfortunate thing is, a lot of the costs at the wastewater treatment plant are fixed costs. So even if you have less flows and less contributions from Cayucos, your costs only go down a very microscopic portion. So really, your ratepayers have to step in and make up the difference on the operating side as well. Moving on, this slide here kind of summarizes the project cost alternatives that Eileen was just kind of giving you the range of. On the left is the new facility, secondary treatment only, no recycling, a little less than $124 million total project cost in current dollars, with about $2.4 million in operating costs are the latest numbers that have come out. Some of these numbers are currently in a little bit of flux, so we've kind of got what we understand to be the latest and greatest for operating costs and capital costs in our analysis. But if you were to escalate those project costs, that project's going to be completed over a handful of years. You add 3% cost inflation, that $124 million works out to be about $136 million. So for planning purposes, that's the number we're going with. We're currently in a bidding environment now where costs seem to be rising each year. A lot of construction contractors are busy. There's not a lot of spare slack in the construction industry, and material costs continue to rise as well. We also escalated the operating cost to when the plant would begin treatment. So what's currently engineering estimate of about $2.4 million for operating the facility, we're assuming it's going to be about $2.8 million, about 5 years down the line when the new treatment plant would come online. Over on the right is the full facility with the indirect potable reuse. Current dollar cost, $167 million, including the so-called contingency, which probably will be needed for something. You factor 3% cost inflation, you're looking at a project that could cost, approaching $185 million, and that's for Morro Bay alone. In the past, it was, $55 million to $60 million, now potentially $180 million and change, so it's a tripling of the financial responsibility for Morro Bay for the treatment plant. Next slide. What we did, the cash flows, instead of showing you all the detailed numbers, and we've provided them, and you will see them again. They might be honed a very little bit. We always try to make adjustments here and there to make it as good as possible. But this kind of shows graphically what's happening with your costs in the future. Currently, we're here, 2016-17. I'll just point out what the different bars are so you can see what the drivers are of the rate increases. The bottom is the operating and maintenance costs, predominantly for your wastewater collection system. These costs are going to gradually escalate each year. We assume 4% cost escalation off the current budget. The green section is the wastewater treatment. And the key thing to note there is starting 2019-20, Cayucos is not going to be contributing 25% anymore, so the city share bumps up by 25%, hence that little bump up in the green section. The orange section represents cash contributions towards the project. Now, the city's in the process of gradually raising rates. Really, you don't have to get the rates to the maximum levels that we talk about until you start having to fund the debt service. And depending on the type of financing, if it's state revolving fund loan, the debt service doesn't start till a year after the project is complete. If it's bond financing, typically it starts, the subsequent year, although you can get a little bit creative with the bond financing and try to phase in the debt service over a few years if that's desirable. We'll talk about some pluses and minuses of that in a little bit. So the orange section, while you're phasing rates and you're generating a little cash, the importance of that is that's helping you to keep your financing lower, which is going to result in lower debt service and in the long term, lower rates overall. The yellow section represents the debt service, and you can see that's a huge increase. It's almost equal to a large chunk of what you're currently paying for your ongoing operating maintenance and basic capital needs. So it's really that debt service for financing the plant that's got the biggest impact on everything. And the other thing with state revolving fund loan is even though the debt service isn't due till a year after the project is complete, they make you set aside 1 year of debt service into a reserve fund. They don't finance the reserve fund like a bond might. Instead, you have to build up your own cash and set it aside. So that's that light yellow bar right there. The practical impact is you really have debt service starting due the year the project is complete, which we're projecting at 2020/21, so just a few years down the line. Under this scenario, this is the base case scenario without the advanced treatment and recycling. We're talking about a maximum sewer rate going from where you currently are. This is the current adopted, where the current adopted rates will take you. But there has to be a big bump up to get over that debt service and make sure you're meeting all your financial requirements related to the debt service. So the maximum sewer rate goes up to $140 per month under the base case scenario. Your current sewer rates, as they were projected 5 years ago, go up to about $84 per month, which was considered a substantial hike at the time. If you don't get state revolving fund loan or WIFIA financing, you'd have to do the more conventional approach, which is what most agencies end up doing in California. Bond financing, some agencies do certificates of participation that are just like bonds. So we built in bond financing as well to give you kind of a range of what this could look like. And if you were to fund, again, this is just the basic facility without the recycling. I shouldn't call it basic because it is a pretty comprehensive project you're doing even under the base case. But your rate would have to go even higher. Why would it go higher? Because the bonds have higher debt service. We assumed a 30-year bond financing at 5%. as opposed to the SRF rate we assumed at 2.25%. So in reality, bond rates are lower right now. Just last summer, they were near their historic lows. They've crept up about 75 basis points since then, but they're still pretty low by historical standards. However, you're not going to be issuing bonds today, not until you get a better sense of what the project costs are going to be. Would you issue those bonds? So we don't know what the rates are going to be down the line. That's why we didn't use today's rates in our analysis. We added a little contingency in and used something in the 5% range, a little closer to the still good rates, but closer to historic norms. But with bond financing, it bumps up the sewer rate that you need from $140 with state revolving fund loan up to $180, and that's on a monthly basis. So that's a pretty substantial impact. We also looked at the full facility. We talked about it's $167 million plus cost inflation, brings it into approaching $185 million. With state revolving fund loan financing, that would bring the rate up to about $175 to $180 per month in that range. And unfortunately, if you do the whole facility and you have to use bond financing, which for many agencies is not a bad thing, it's just not as good as the state revolving fund loan program, the rate could be as high as $225 per month. So this is a very substantial rate. You wouldn't be the only agency in California with rates like that. I've worked for other agencies that have rates in that range. Los Osos has a very high sewer rate. They also have, property tax funding that supplements that for funding their new treatment plant. And there's other agencies in the state that have had to go through some pretty substantial projects that are in that range as well. So you won't be the highest in the state. I know there's some questions. Hey, if we were to implement these rates, what's the breakdown of what the rate would be used for? So we put together a couple slides here showing with the alternative A, which I'm calling it with just secondary treatment only, no recycling, going to $140 per month with the SRF, the State Revolving Fund or WIFIA loan financing. And here's what it breaks down. Here's your current rate here. Here's what the new rate would be. Obviously, with inflation, the collection system and basic administration would increase. The treatment costs are increasing as well, largely because Cayucos is pulling out their 25% share. That's a big, and obviously cost inflation. But again, the big thing is that new debt service. That's $67 per month. That's almost half of the total cost. On top of that, in order to, whenever you get any kind of debt financing, there's often a number of financial covenants that come along with it, one called debt service coverage. So there's going to have to be certain financial metrics you're going to meet, but in meeting those metrics, the excess funds that you generate in addition to debt service can be used for things like pay-as-you-go capital projects for your own collection system. So we did build in some funding for ongoing collection system repairs, replacements. You've got a very old system out there that is in need of repair. I know the city's been addressing some of those issues, but that's not a one-time thing. That's going to be going on probably for quite some time in the future. So there is part of the funds available for funding capital needs. And this slide shows the same thing under the full cost facility. But again, we're assuming state revolving fund loan and the WIFIA financing with a rate going from the current level of $62.50 up to $180 per month. I won't go into every number, but again, you've got an increase in everything. Collection a little bit, treatment costs are going to bump up. Huge portion of the bump up is for the debt service for financing the new facility. So in terms of the implementation, unfortunately, when you want to get financing, no one's going to lend you money unless you have the financial security to repay the debt set in advance. And in California, that means going through the Proposition 218 rate process, so your rates are officially on the books and in place, so any prospective lender, including state revolving fund loan, can have the comfort that you've got the finances in order that they will lend you funds. The bond market's going to demand it, and state revolving fund loan does its own analysis and will not issue any financing agreements until they do their own internal analysis and they want to see your Prop 218 process and the official ordinance that's been adopted supporting those rates. So what we're looking at is, because this maximum rate doesn't need to be into effect for a few years down the line when that debt service hits, but you have to adopt it in advance in order to get the financing, what we're looking at is having the city potentially adopt a maximum rate that would take you where you need to go. There are different approaches for getting from here to the maximum that have their own benefits and potential disadvantages that I'll talk about in a second. But you'd adopt this maximum rate with a goal of giving yourself the financial security to fund the project. Then in future years, you'd reevaluate. You don't have to charge these maximum rates. If for some reason there was grants magically came through for $100 million, not only do you not need to charge them, you can't charge them because there's under Prop 218, the state law in California, the rates cannot exceed reasonable estimates of the cost of service. So the rates are always going to reflect what the city needs to fund, and the city's been committed to making sure that the rate only recovers what it needs to fund. Another one option I've hinted at a few times is the timing of those rate increases. You could continue on the path with the current adopted rates for the next 3 more years. You've got 3 years left of a 5-year rate increase. And at the end of that time, either bumping up to the maximum or phasing into the maximum rate over a couple of years. The benefit of that is it kind of pushes this additional rate increase off until a future year, which helps the ratepayers. They don't have to pay as much in the intervening years. The other option is you could start phasing into these higher level of rates quicker. Ratepayers might not like that in the near term, but what that would do is generate more cash financing for the project over the next few years, which would ultimately result in less debt financing and lower debt service and a little bit lower rate over the longer term. So it's kind of a near-term versus long-term game with the rates. The more now, the less later, or vice versa. So you do have some flexibility, but we're looking to get some input on, how quickly would you want to phase in, even if it's just, some generic ideas or that you may have at this stage of the game. Another one is the bill recovery. The city has a combined utility bill that's sent to all the customers monthly. You can imagine if you bump the rate up from $62.50 to $180 for the sewer only, that's going to be a big impact on the monthly bill. Some other agencies that have gone through this, for example, Los Osos, have opted not to put it all on the property tax, not to put it all on the monthly bill, but to instead collect a portion on the property tax rolls. And under California's Health and Safety Code, sewer rates can be collected on the property tax rolls just as a matter of bill collection. A lot of agencies do this who don't, for example, have water service. If they have sewer service alone, they don't need to bother with the whole utility billing system, so they just collect it on the tax roll. The benefits of that are it gets it off the monthly bill, which reduces potential for delinquency. Your county, San Luis Obispo County, is on what's called the teeter plan, meaning that when someone puts charges on the property tax rolls, they give the agency 100% of those taxes, and then they worry about the delinquencies. So you put it on the tax rolls, you don't get impacted for any property tax delinquencies. However, that does represent some changes, and this could be for all of the bill, or it could be for a portion of the bill. It could be, for example, for the debt service associated with a new treatment plant, or for all your residential customers, you can put the entire bill on the property tax roll. So there's some flexibility there. In order to do that, you have to go through a process that's similar to going through the rate increase process. You have to send notification for everyone that you would be looking to put these charges on the tax rolls, wait 45 days, then hold a public hearing at which you would approve of this bill collection method. This could be done concurrently with Prop 218 when you go through the process, or it could be done at a later date, so it could be independent. You don't necessarily have to make the decision right now. But it does represent some changes, and the big one is the bill would not, when you put on the tax rolls, the funding responsibility transitions from the bill payer, who may be the property owner or may be a tenant in that facility and transitions over to the property owner themselves. A lot of property owners write this off in their taxes, so they're getting a kind of a tax discount that comes out of it, so it helps reduce the burden. Technically, I don't believe that's legal, but it's widespread throughout the USA. And the other thing is, when you put money on property tax rolls, you're only getting the money coming in twice a year. Typically, I believe it's in December and April, so you're not going to have this ongoing flow of funds. However, you could kind of time your debt service to correspond with those periods. And what we typically see agencies do who rely on money from property tax rolls, because the revenue stream's a little different, they just carry a little bit higher level of fund reserves to make sure they can make it between those semi-annual payments from the county. So those are kind of two concepts we wanted to throw your way. How quickly to phase in? Do you like the notion of putting a portion of this on the property tax rolls? And the other thing I just wanted to mention that you have options for also, if you didn't get state revolving fund loan or WIFIA financing, if you had to go to the bond market for all or part of this, you have some options there as well. I mentioned you do have a little bit of ability to structure the debt to kind of balance other competing objectives. And one of the things some agencies do is if they've got a lot of debt service coming down the line, what they might do is structure the debt to phase in over a few years. Some ways agencies do that are having no principal payments for the first couple of years. To get more extreme, they might even do something called capitalized interest, where you increase the size of the debt issue, but that extra money is used to pay interest the first year or first 2 years or a portion of it to reduce the near-term burden. The benefits of that, again, are lower debt service in the early years. The negatives of that are they result in higher debt service and more rate increases over the longer term. So just wanted to bring out those issues. The final thing I wanted to mention is cost containment. This is something, before you raise rates, everyone's going to want to make sure you're doing your darndest to minimize what the project's going to cost. And the city's been doing a lot on these fronts. They've hired an independent grant expert, Kestrel Consulting, that's been working with the city. They're going after grants. There's not a ton of grants out there that are going to fund a substantial portion of the facility, is kind of what we hear. But there may be ability to get some grant financing along the way, and every dollar helps. For example, there's some water smart grants that I've heard are potential for this project. Number two is the city is pursuing low-cost subsidized financing. The two best programs out there, one, the state revolving fund loan program, and number two, the WIFIA program, which is new. The city's, with Kestrel Consulting, has submitted its initial application for that. I'm not sure how long, so the preliminary letters are in, and I think that's a big part of the process. It may be within a few months down the line, they'll let you know if you're eligible to apply for the project cost. The WIFIA only funds up to 49% of the project cost. So even if you got WIFIA, the other half would have to come from another source, ideally state revolving fund loan financing. But in the big picture, your best bet is state revolving fund loan financing for the whole project. It wasn't all that long ago the state revolving fund loan was going around the state championing agencies, hey, we've got tons of money, come and get it. And they did. And people are going for it now for big dollar amounts. They gave almost $1 billion award to Sacramento Regional for major treatment plan improvements for their facilities. They used to have only like a 25 to 50 million annual maximum per year, but they got rid of their maximum, and Sacramento was able to get $1 billion. Now there's a number of agencies that have put in applications for 500 million, 800 million, 185 million, whatever this may be. So the word that they're giving to agencies now is, yes, we do have funding. Yes, we have capacity to do more funding, but the amount of applications potentially coming in are overwhelming our ability to be able to guarantee this financing for folks. So we'll do what we can, but please don't bank on us and keep your options open for other sources. So at the end of the day, it could be a combination of, part state revolving fund loan, part WIFIA, part bonds. No one's quite sure yet because nothing's been yet approved. But as far as these rates, the city's going after the lowest cost financing possible, looking for grants. There's value engineering being done throughout the design-build process. The city's pursuing a design-build process, which is a relatively new development in California, and that's expected to yield cost savings through the project construction and also expedite the timing of the project to hopefully minimize costs and prevent the project from rolling over to even more years and subject to more inflationary cost increases. And again, as I've already mentioned, you need the clearance for your rates, but what the city's committed to is kind of reevaluating what these rates need to be each year and trying to keep them as low as possible while funding all the needs. But there's going to be some guidance needed from Citizens Finance Committee and other City Council and other committees as to how quickly you want to phase in the rates. So in terms of the next steps, tomorrow is a presentation to the Public Works Advisory Board. Next week, the City Council is going to be given a presentation, kind of going over a lot of the same information, introduce the rate study, what the rates could look like. Then in May, we'll be coming back to the Water Reclamation Facility Citizens Advisory Committee with a goal of coming back to the council again on May 9th to kind of get approval to move forward with a Prop 218 rate increase process. Once that happens, the city would get out their Prop 218 notices soon thereafter, very soon thereafter, and then that starts a 45-day waiting period before you can hold your Prop 218 rate hearing. The way Prop 218 works, the folks who adopted it, it was called the Right to Vote on Taxes Initiative. So for a lot of taxes and fees in California, you can't increase them unless you get a vote of property tax owners or the affected folks. However, they did recognize that water, sewer, garbage services are cost of service. So as long as you meet the cost of service requirements, you don't need to get a vote. However, the rates are subject to majority protest, meaning if more than 50% of the affected parcels submit a written protest, if they do, the rates cannot move forward and you'd have to kind of go back to the drawing board again. This doesn't happen very often, but if you do have an organized citizen group or someone against the rate increases, especially with the level of these rate increases, it could have an impact. Just up the road a little bit in Cambria Community Services District, they had a group that opposed their rate increases at one point, were able to get a successful majority protest. And here, your population is only about 10,700, so you only have so many parcels to go around. But I guess that concludes what I was going to cover here, so we'll open it up to questions about the finances, and we would like to get any input you have, and even if it's not at this stage of the game, to keep city staff apprised of what you're thinking so we can incorporate it as the recommendations move forward.
I'll start with one general question because it relates to what you just stated, and that's, you said the majority protest, is that based on citizen count, resident count, payers, voters?
Yeah, typically it's based on the number of parcels, one vote per parcel, or one written protest per parcel.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Walter.
Hi. Thanks for your presentation. I do have a question with respect to are there any preferences available at any step of the way here for communities that are undertaking managed coastal retreat? Is that being incentivized or in some way rewarded? For example, I'm thinking, would we have, is there a certain amount of access to the state revolving fund carved out for communities that are undertaking managed coastal retreat?
Unfortunately, not that I'm aware of. But the type of project you're doing, which may involve recycling, things like that, that does tend to get looked at as a higher priority project from SRF than if it was just replacing a bunch of collection system sewer lines or lift stations. But I'm not familiar with any special funding sources available for communities retreating from the coastline, but I know Kestrel Consulting is a kind of a grant expert, funding expert for looking into the whole realm of possibilities of what might be out there. I will defer to Rob if he has anything to add on that.
Just want to say that it makes us appear appear better to the granting and loan agencies. We have a where the project as envisioned has water recycling, retreat from the coast, greenfield development, energy recovery. So all those elements play into making us look more attractive to the grant and loaning agencies.
Thanks. Good question. John?
Yeah. You mean brownfields redevelopment, or is it?
The new site will be a greenfield site, so it's easy to construct on.
Okay. Some questions popped up. Are there any scenarios where the extra cost for the reclamation or the recycling facility gets captured where it does not impact the actual rates paid by the city? I mean, are we going to spend an extra, $100 million to have a water recycling facility and not recapture any of that cost?
There is a potential. A couple things I didn't really cover in here. One is Rob initially mentioned the notion of the city attorney and some Prop 218 issues. One has to do with that recycled water portion. So if the base facility is, with the state revolving fund loan financing brings the monthly cost to about $140 with the recycling, which includes capital cost and some additional operating costs. That brings it up to approximately $180. So it's $35 to $40 a month for the recycling. Can those costs be recovered from your sewer rates, or would they have to be recovered from your water rates? Now, other agencies in California that have recycled water facilities, some have deemed them a water supply project, so it's all funded on the water side. For other agencies, it's an effluent diversion project. They keep the effluent from going into a local waterway. Those are thrown 100% on the sewer side, and yet there are other agencies that kind of have a mix of the two. So there's a little more analysis that has to be done on that to see whether the full cost is going to be borne on the sewer side, or if there wouldn't be a portion of that cost. It would still be the same amount that would be rolled over to the water rates. But in terms of what you're talking about, there is a potential for savings for the recycled water project over the longer term. In the near term, you're talking about, yeah.
Well, the question I have there is, so we have a cost for a project, which is, so we're going to spend, say, $100 million for the recycled water recycle facility over what's required for treatment of the.
It's about 42. It's about 42 million. Aren't you talking about a difference between 124 and 167 roughly? I mean, are we talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
So for the
43 million.
Yeah, for the additional costs for water recycling, it adds about $35 to $40 a month to the rate. So that portion is, in our city attorney's initial opinion, is that can't be recovered through sewer funds. It needs to be, it's a water supply issue. It needs to be recovered from water funds. Let me see if I understand the question. Is there any way to offset that cost by savings, by not having some other water supply? It's a bit speculative right now. So we pay about $2,000 an acre foot for state water. That cost in the near term or in the next few years will either go up or down. Our local facilities bonds will be paid off, but there's a large project looming out in the state of California to supply that state water. So what those costs are have a huge range to them. We've heard $25 billion statewide for the Bay Delta project. So there's the potential by having a local water supply to offset those costs. But currently, it's a bit speculative at this time.
And so there is no wild guess about what those costs could be then? I mean,
It would be a wild guess.
yeah, no, then that's fine. But so we're spending an extra $40 million on a wild guess is what I'm hearing. Is that right?
The additional $40 million in costs are for the goal of water independence, to be more secure locally without having to depend on state water as our main source of water.
Okay. So there were a couple other questions I had in there. What is the present value factor for, like these annual costs? Have you converted annual costs into a present value factor, or is it just those costs are annual and improvement costs are the present costs?
I think we converted everything to future costs, then back to an annual cost. So we took present-day cost estimates, inflated them, and then annualized them based on the discount rate on the loans. Is that correct, Alan?
Well, for our line of what we do, it's more, looking into the future, building the projections, and seeing where the rates need to go over a number of years. I haven't discounted the rates back into current dollars, for example, something like that. But a lot of times when they're doing the project analysis and trying to figure out, project A, project B, project C, sometimes there's some life cycle cost analysis and, bringing things back to present value to try to compare the alternatives. But if one costs more than the other, it's going to cost more on a present value basis as well. So that's not part of what we've done. It's doable. I don't know how valuable the information is for our role.
In the water reclamation plan, we do have annualized costs, life cycle costs, and if we need to, we can have Eileen or Mike come up and talk about those a little bit.
Can I just add one more thing? You talked about the recycled water. There is the potential, I believe, for phasing the project in. It might end up costing a little more than if you do it all at once. But certainly, I think elements of the project they've been talked about, could be phased in at different stages.
Okay. Trying to figure out what notes I had here.
I want to get to everybody here in public comment.
Okay.
We'll have discussion.
Okay.
Right.
I just want to make sure that the significance of something that Mr. Handler just said isn't lost on folks here. And that is, as much of the costs that can be diverted to the water supply side will protect our folks who are on fixed and limited incomes. Because the water supply side is based on usage. And so if you use less, you pay less. Right now, I am very concerned about the effect of the sewage rate. But I just want to make sure that folks out in the audience are understanding that as much as we can legitimately divert to the water supply equation, the more we can keep the rates down for folks on fixed and limited incomes. And I'd like to see that pursued to the max.
Well, let's hold that discussion. I think that relates to supply and demand, some other supply and the demand. But thank you, Walter. That's a valid comment. I want to get through this in public comment. Dave, please.
I had a couple of questions related to the concept of putting part of the rates on the property tax rolls. Just from clarification, are we talking about sewer rate going on the property tax roll as a possibility, and water would not be put on the property tax roll, or is it a combination of the two?
Yeah, you're bringing up an issue. There's some legal discrepancy in the industry regarding water versus sewer. It's not done a lot for water agencies because the water bills are submitted monthly based on the monthly water meter readings. But for sewer agencies, most agencies in California have like a fixed residential sewer charge. Or if it's volumetric, it's often based on the prior winter water use period. So it's kind of a set amount. You know what it's going to be. So it's pretty common to do sewer only on the property tax rolls. I'm trying to think. I've worked with a lot of agencies. I don't know. None are coming to mind that do water. But in the Health and Safety Code, it specifically talks about sewer rates able to be recovered that way. Whether it's all or a portion of it, the city would have discretion there.
So I wanted to, my next question was about the process for getting that approved as far as putting, let's say we want to put a portion of the sewer rates on the property tax rolls. And I get the Proposition 218 process, as you mentioned, that's essentially a protest process. You mentioned that we could consider putting part of the sewer rates on the property tax rolls concurrent with that Proposition 218 process. Now, in adding to the property tax rolls, is it the same process as Proposition 218? Is it part of Proposition 218 process, or is it a separate process that has separate requirements from the voters?
Yeah, it's an entirely separate process under the California Health and Safety Code. However, it pretty much parallels the Prop 218 process, where you would have to send notification to the property owners that the bill paying responsibility is going to be on the property owner. You have to, same with the Prop 218 notice, let them know the date, time, and place of a public hearing, have your 45-day waiting period. Then at the public hearing, I believe that's subject to majority protest. So it's almost like a parallel process to Prop 218 that's just for getting the bill on the tax rolls. And then each year, the City Council has to submit the charges to the tax roll. So, you just approve it at a council meeting. So it's kind of a parallel process, and I was just bringing up, you could do it concurrently with the Prop 218 since it's got a lot of the same statutory requirements, so it could be one notice that had an element of that in it as well, just as you could do water and sewer rates on the same notice. Or if it's something that, you don't know if you want to pursue at this stage of the game, it could be pursued sometime down the line, particularly if this maximum rate's not going to go into effect for a few years. You'd have time before you to make a decision whether you want to pursue that or not.
And also, for clarification, this may be a question for Craig. As far as the financing, choosing the state revolving fund versus this WIFIA, or doing a bond issuance, when you're let's say we're going to use a state revolving fund, we have that opportunity. At what point do you lock in the rate for that? And I understand the debt service starts after the project's completed. At what point are you locking in the rate on the loan?
My understanding, I'm trying to remember, we've worked with SRF for a number of projects and always recommend it for everybody. I think it's when they approve your preliminary financing commitments. So they go through a whole application process. There's engineering components that Mike and Eileen are familiar with. There's a permitting requirements. There's also a financial application. They want to make sure, as I say, you've adopted your rates pursuant to Prop 218 to secure the financing and the financial covenants. So there's that whole process that gets occurred, and at some point when they give you kind of a preliminary financing commitment, and I believe your rate is locked in at that point, then once you get that, you still have to go out, bid the project. Sometimes there's some additional design work that's necessary because you don't know what the project's going to cost. Then they approve, before you award the bid, they approve kind of the costing, and then throughout the project. So I think it's when you get the preliminary financing commitment, which is not at the end of the line, but it's, I think you have to be through enough of the design so that they can actually evaluate what the project is and that it meets all their criteria.
Is that similar for doing a bond issuance, or are there any differences there?
Yeah, the bond issuance, you could pull the trigger at any point you want, provided you had the financial security to do that. So if you adopted a max rate of $180, you can go out the next day and tap the bond market if you wanted to.
Now, you'd mentioned that most agencies, I thought you had mentioned that most agencies are doing bond issuance as opposed to the state revolving fund. And this WIFIA is something fairly recent.
The WIFIA is new. It's kind of a new funding program, so you're kind of one of the early agencies to be going after it as well. Other agencies are also. Is there a reason why most agencies
chose to do bond issuance instead of using the state revolving fund?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because there are agencies we recommend state revolving fund loan to, and they say, hey, we don't want to deal with the application process, because it does add time. If you have to do a project starting in 6 months and you got to get the construction going, there's a little time lag in getting approval from the state revolving fund loan, so some agencies have not wanted to do that. Additionally, depending on the project, sometimes they have other requirements for Davis-Bacon labor requirements. Sometimes there's, Buy American Steel or whatever requirements that sometimes could result in a little bit higher project costs. So if it's a small project, sometimes it doesn't make sense to go for state revolving fund loan. Also, there's some administrative elements to it as well. But also, the state revolving fund loan is not easy to get for every project out there. You happen to have a project that's a wastewater project, improving treatment. It's right in line with the Clean Water State Revolving Fund Loan Program, so there's no reason not to go after it, at least find out if you can get it. There are a lot of projects out there, particularly on the water side, where the money's a little harder to get, where people don't believe they're going to meet the criteria for the program, so they don't even bother going after it. But yeah, that's the goal, is in our mind, to go for the low-cost financing first, and then you can fill in with the bond stuff. But far and away, there's a lot of projects that don't qualify for state revolving fund loan. Bond financing is, widely used throughout California, probably by far the most common type of financing for public works projects, tax-exempt bonds.
Okay. And my last question is, when will the draft rate study be available to the public? Is it available now, or I understood there's...
Well, we've got all the analysis available. We have to, there's a couple issues we have to clarify. We want to get in there regarding the water rates. We might have to change some of these numbers a little bit. And how you implement this on the water rate side, I just want to add there's some flexibility there as well. Could it be done through the existing water rate structure for the water component? Sure. Could it be a fixed charge on the water rates? Sure. That doesn't sound like that would be some preference for some folks up here, but so there are, a range of options that you would have for implementing something like that. But we're working on it, and we hope to have something very soon that we could submit out there. But it's going to have numbers exactly or very similar to what's already been put out there.
And we will be posting the presentation that you were given onto the city's website today, or first thing, this PowerPoint that was just given, that'll have those, the breakdown of the costs.
Is that information in the PowerPoint part of the rate study?
Yes. Little clarification on WIFIA. WIFIA is a federal loan program that's brand new through the EPA. So we'll be, in addition to CEQA, we'll need NEPA, or the federal environmental clearance for that. And then for SRF funding, before we can apply, we have to have our environmental document certified. So our EIR has to be complete and certified and be beyond the contest period before we can apply for any federal or state funding.
Thank you.
I got two more.
Well, I'm sorry, we need to get through everybody. Okay. I'm concerned about the time, so because there's a meeting at 6 and we have 2 other agenda items, so I want to get to the public. Just real quick, you mentioned on the property tax, the delinquency, it's funded at 100%, so there's no deferred delinquency. Is that correct statement?
Yeah, to the city, you get 100% of the amount of the billings you put on the tax roll, and the county deals with the delinquency and keeps any penalties for themselves. So it's kind of a...
Okay, so they go after it. All right, so it would be fair to say you are, in exchange for not having any delinquency, you may have a delay in receiving those payments twice a year versus monthly.
Well, no, they give you 100%, so there's no delay. It's almost like there's a zero delinquency rate.
No, I meant the April, December.
Yeah, there's no delinquency. And they give you 100% of what you build, part in April, part in December. But if there is a delinquency, then the county deals with it, and if there's any surcharge, they get, I think, some penalty charges they get on top of it that kind of makes up the difference. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. John, go ahead.
I'd like you to check that with San Luis Obispo County, because my experience with Kern County is that they only did that in regards to tax funds, but any kind of special assessments or fees, they did not apply the teeter plan, so it may not apply. As far as the rates that they're coming up with, compared to the median household income, which I understand Morro Bay is a little less than $50,000 a year, you're looking at a combined water and sewer rate that's equal to between 6 and 7% of median household income, which is far and above higher than the affordability index. Would that enable the city to qualify for additional grants from somebody?
Well, the city's certainly trying to get the grants as possible. Your median income, unfortunately, when you look at the city in aggregate basis, is above certain limits. Like, for example, state revolving fund loan program does have a small community grant program based on, meeting some percentage of median household income. Unfortunately, you don't meet that. But it's possible, and I know they're going after what they can. Unfortunately, you're a little too large to get some of the funding programs out there, and your income levels on an aggregate basis may be a little bit high. But you're right, it's the affordability index, I think, is around 3% or something like that from the EPA. This is going to be a substantial burden on a lot of the folks that live here. And here in Morro Bay, you've kind of got a range of incomes. So it's going to be a big hit for those who can't least afford it. But I don't know if that translates into, I don't know if your income is low enough to get you, eligible for certain grant funding programs, but it might help with others. And my understanding is that Kestrel Consulting is doing a pretty comprehensive search for every dollar of grant funding that this project could be eligible for. But
okay.
Not exactly 100% sure of the answer to your question. Yeah.
And also on your analysis, does it assume generally the same split in revenues between commercial accounts compared to residential accounts in the future?
Yeah, we're assuming across the board rate increases on the sewer side. So both commercial and residential would see similar percentage-wise increases.
Okay, thank you.
Don, please, any questions?
No.
Thank you. Bart?
One, I guess, question clarification. I want to make sure that we can answer Dorothy's question to start this. To simplify this, go from right now, sewer, water, monthly rate. I know what I pay, but it's like $110 a month. I don't know if that's average or not. What would that be? What's the range with alternatives 3 and 4, which are basically the same number? So just pick one number. So what, and I know depending on the financing, but it's like 180 to 220. So does that take, now is that for both water and sewer?
No, this is just the sewer only.
247.
Okay, so how do we answer her question? Very simple. I'm paying $110. Let's say $100 a month right now.
Sure. 50 water, 60 sewer.
50 and 60. So when this goes in, when alternative 4 goes in to play, what's the range of what that could be?
Well, if it's state revolving fund loan financing, we're talking about 180 for sewer plus 50 for water. There's 230. And if it's going to be no state revolving fund loan with anything of the sort, if it has to be 100% bond financed, you're talking a rate of approximately 180 plus 50 for water brings it up to 230.
Well, they're both 230s.
Oh, did I say? Yeah. 225 with the bond financing plus 50, 275 for
so it'd be
water.
230 to 275 range.
So
for combined water sewer.
So 110 goes to 230 to 275.
With full tertiary recycled water.
Yeah, for alternative 4, which is what we're talking about. Okay.
Unfortunately, so yes,
no,
that's the range you're looking at. Yeah.
Very simply, so that's
Over double.
That's what people are looking for. I think that's what Dorothy was looking for. She asked the question slightly differently, but that's fundamentally what she's looking for. The just comments, I think, relative to future presentations. One, these are eye charts none of us could read anything that you put up on the boards there. I know you're trying to save money and use the same presentation as you use for a board meeting as you are here, but you might as well not even put the slides up there, from my perspective, because you can't read them. The escalation to me is, I had asked earlier, is anything not in the numbers? Escalation is a rather significant number. When you're just looking at alternatives, I understand you can make the argument to not put escalation in, but we're beyond that now. So in estimating technology, you basically have an S-curve of expenditures, and you put in what the midpoint, or you can do it more complicated by individual things. I realize that too. But to not have escalation in the number, I think, is misleading people to go through a phase one, if you will, part of a presentation here, and then you'd add in escalation. The escalation is part of a project cost, so that was a pretty big omission from my view. Granted, you can make the logical argument again, look, we're comparing things, we'll do it on a current day basis. But we're now to where we're actually going to do this, and we ought to know what the project is. We shouldn't have gone to your presentation, in my opinion, to then escalate that up. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Bart. I'd like to open it up for public comment now on this agenda item. If anybody would like to speak, will you please come up to the podium and identify yourself? Thank you.
My name is Homer Alexander. First, I want to speak to the rate increase. I don't understand how you can offer an opinion regarding the potential rate increase until you review the actual Bartles and Well rate study. I would think that you would want to see the cash flow statement and the details, the revenue and expense, and the details for the revenue and expense assumptions that were used to develop the new rate. Also, where are the rate increases for the 5 different commercial categories? I suspect the hotel and restaurant owners would be very interested. According to your mission statement, the role of the Finance Committee is to provide citizen input to the City Council and staff regarding financial policy or process issues, including audits, financial budgets, contract expenditures, and financial reports. The slides were informative, but they were not the actual report. For that reason, I suggest you defer any comments regarding the rate increase until you have the opportunity to review the entire Bartles and Wells study. Regarding your finance options, I personally would be in favor of including the capital costs on the project, on the property taxes. Not that I would break the law, but the ability to deduct the costs would be very advantageous to some of the ratepayers. Thank you.
Thank you. And for the record, I requested a copy of the rate study well before this meeting, but it wasn't available, and Mr. Schmolinger did reply on that, as well as the PowerPoint slides. So go ahead, Craig.
Yes, thank you. And to Rob Leivick's earlier point, there was a kind of a late breaking decision out of our city attorney via opinion, so that kind of shook things up a little bit. We fully intended to bring that forward for review. It just a couple little things, so we're making sure we're covering our bases on that end.
But we will receive it, and as soon as we do, all our members will have the opportunity to receive it.
Correct.
And comment. Thank you. Okay, additional public comment, please. Anyone else? Okay, thank you for your patience. Bring it back here for discussion.
If I could, yeah, I was curious. Would a property owner, if we decided to go the property tax method, would the property owner have the option of prepaying the liability so that doesn't show up on their property tax?
I don't believe it's a The question is, could you prepay the entire liability and not have it on your assessment? Is that the question?
Yes.
Well, you could make that an option if you wanted to, but once the financing's locked in, then you're kind of locked into paying those financing debt service each year. So I think early in the process, if the city wanted to make an option for that, there's a way of doing it.
So that they wouldn't have to go through the bonds or the loan amount.
I think as long as it would debt service, I don't think you could prepay the O&M costs over time.
Yeah, not the O&M, but in terms of the financing, if someone wanted to pay their share of the project costs, keep in mind early on the process, you might not know what the final dollar amount is, but if someone wanted to pay that in lieu of having to take out state revolving fund loan or other types of financing, there are ways of doing it, and they do that all the time when they have assessment districts.
Yes. Then the other question is about how much a year was the capital improvement projects portion of, you're going to have some extra money which they have to have a budget for, which typically gets used on capital improvement. Would that be considered enterprise fund, or would that be eligible for general fund?
That's only for the sewer enterprise fund.
So basically, that's what you'd use to fix the sewer system?
Yes.
Yeah, you generate about $1 million to $1.5 million per year for sewer projects. And there are some things that are not yet known, depending on what type of financing you get. You don't know what the debt service coverage requirements are. For example, state revolving fund loan often only has a 110 coverage requirement, meaning you have to bring in enough revenues to fund all your operations, all your debt service, plus 10% additional debt service, which is the additional coverage they have to make sure you've got the revenue stream that you're not going to default on their payment, even if you have a little disturbance in your finances one year. But for some agencies, they have been requesting or mandating a 120 coverage test. So there's still some unknowns out there. That's why we talk about this maximum rate. There's going to be things to evaluate in future years when the financing does come through, the type of financing, the type of legal covenants that may enable you to cut back on that rate here and there, depending on what happens.
Thank you.
Kind of following up on that, we also heard at a recent meeting a 125 requirement. What does that pertain to? I'm just trying to get a sense of what we might actually be looking at here.
Yeah, what was common on the bond side of things is to have a debt service coverage ratio in the 120 to 125 range for water sewer revenue bonds. The WIFIA program, it's new. I'm not 100% sure of all the details of it yet, but they might have a 125 coverage covenant, as I think I heard somebody mention that once. So maybe that's where the 125 comes from. That's a pretty common benchmark in water wastewater revenue bonds. But if you're doing bonds, there are things you can do to keep it at 120. Sometimes agencies make it lower, but then it's considered weaker legal covenants and could result in higher cost of bond insurance or higher interest rate. There's other things that you can do with the legal covenants I won't go into here to try to give yourself flexibility to meet these financial covenants without putting a strain necessarily on the rates. For example, being able to count your unencumbered fund reserves towards meeting the coverage requirement. We've been able to do that with some agencies and get away with it and not take a hit in the rating process or the rate process. So again, a lot of little, I think many details to be fleshed out in the future that could benefit you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, one, again, for future presentations, and it's Cayucas to anticipate those questions, why they're 2 years ahead of us. Eileen's presentation talked about we're making provisions such that they could join us. I think that ship is far sailed, if I understood what was being said. And also sort of put in perspective, can I assume that Cayucas does not include a water reclamation aspect to theirs? There's truly just a water treatment facility? I mean, just those questions are going to come up, particularly in WRF or other places, as to what's going on here. So can I assume that Cayucas is not including water reclamation, or are they?
Currently, with their current project, they are proposing to build an MBR plant with ocean discharge, but they've talked about future phases of the project that would include potential for water recycling.
Okay, so I believe this was a receive and file. We would like to have time to think about all this information and then also receive the copy of the actual rate study, which I am assuming will also include the commercial rates. Yes. Yes, okay. And then you would like us to comment on that, I presume. Go ahead, Rob.
Yes, so we've received some comments here today that we can clarify in the report, and then as that report is available, we would take any individual comments on the report itself.
Okay. And logistically, so we don't have any Brown Act violations on those comments, would you need them all to come to the chair first and then to you, or individually? How do you want to handle that?
I think to avoid the Brown Act issues, they shouldn't come to the chair first, because you would have multiple board members sending you comments, and they should come either directly to me or the program. Might be easiest, actually, if they went to Craig, your liaison from staff, and then he can forward them over to the project team.
All right. And then I'll ask my members here, would a week be sufficient upon receipt of the study for you to get your comments back to Craig?
How long of a document is this? How long is this
Approximately
document?
how many pages?
I mean, there's a number of tables and stuff that develop cash flow projections that the gentleman was referring to. That we have draft cash flows and stuff. We just might have to hone them a little bit more.
Just an estimate, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it depends if you want to look into the detail or just kind of read the summaries up front. Maybe 40 pages.
And then is there anything included in that document that will talk about if we pushed some to the property tax side, what that would look like? You know, you had charts for the rate increase, but if that was pushed onto the property tax, is there anything in that document that lays that out?
I don't have it broken out. I mean, 'cause it's just kind of conceptual at this stage, but it could be, I mean, it's a wide open range of how much we could put into, for example, if the debt service only was put on the property tax rolls, it would mean this on the tax rolls, and the monthly sewer bill would look like this. So, yeah. Good idea.
I think that's the best illustrative example, is if debt service is placed on property tax rolls. That's what other agencies have done in this area, is place debt service on the tax rolls, and then O&M on the monthly bill. So perhaps we could provide that as an illustrative example of what that would mean.
I would like to, I mean, if we're going to be providing comments on this document, I'd like to have as much, you know, of the options laid out in the document before we put comments.
The pluses and minuses, and, yeah, you bet.
Yeah, I think you're asking for our opinion on some variation or how that would be, but if you can give us some high-level examples and how other agencies have done it, then we can, you know, read between the lines, so to speak. So that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
I'd just like to clarify that we're not actually going to officially receive and file until we've had the opportunity to read the water rate study and comment on it.
I thought we receive and file.
The presentation is what you're receiving, is the presentation. You can't receive and file the report because it wasn't given to you. It would be difficult to receive and file something that doesn't exist in your hands.
Well, there seems to be a concern out there about this, and I'm concerned about that we just, you know, defer, because that's a vote, right? It's a vote to receive and file. So I feel that we should defer on that vote until we've had an opportunity to actually receive the report and then go from there.
I would concur with that.
I didn't think we were voting on it. Typically, the receive is just in the, which would actually not even be the presentation, it would be the staff report, which is part of our minutes. So I need some clarification from staff. I wasn't planning to make a motion or, yeah.
So, Barbara, if I might, the way this agenda item was published, the title in summary under business item reads updated draft sewer / water rate study presentation, and then in parentheses review / comment. There wasn't a file component.
Okay,
And then
so
when you,
I take that
when
back.
you flip to the staff report, it reads the same way. So it's just a review and comment and get back to us on it. So.
Which is what we did. Thanks, Walter. That's good clarification. Go ahead, John.
So we have provided you with some verbal comments, but written comments won't be sent to the City Council from the advisory committee until after the City Council considers the draft report a week from tonight.
True.
That's interesting.
Well, I would advise as a workaround that as many people as many members of the committee attend the city council meeting so that you're in a position to make comment at public comment, or maybe even drop off your comments or get your comments in before the city council meets.
So let's get to when do we think we will have the final rate study? That's the elephant in the room.
I'm going to have to rely on Alex to give us an estimate.
Yeah, it's just going to be called the draft because, I mean, there's still some things like how quickly you're going to phase in the rates or not phase in the rates. There's these things that would come back in. For example, if it came out through the whole process, hey, we want to phase in rates starting next year and, you know, start ratcheting up to the max to generate more cash funding, reduce debt service, we would go back and then run that through the cash flows to see, well, what would the rates look like under that scenario, which would be a little different than the current scenario that we're assuming. We should talk with your legal counsel and try to get everything squared away as quickly as possible and within a week. Get something out. We do have the table. We do have some things that could be shared at this level. I don't know if the staff's comfortable because we haven't resolved a couple of issues. But
The issue is we haven't broken it into sewer and water rates. We're proceeding with the assumption that it would all be on sewer rates. So we could provide the draft report assuming it's all going to be on sewer rates, but with the caveat that our legal counsel will provide input on what we can actually do. But I'm going to state this pretty simply. It really doesn't matter what pocket you take the money out of to pay the bill. It's still going to be the total amount will be the same at the end of the day that we have to fund, whether it's in sewer rates or water rates. It's still going to add up to approximately, for an SRF-funded project, $180 million a year. So I think we can provide that report fairly quickly with the caveat that distribution across the two funds may change.
Go ahead, John, please.
Okay. Well, the difficulty comes in regards to Prop 218 because Prop 218, when they adopt the resolution to start that process, they have to have dollars and cents rates presented to the public at that time. And so if you present the City Council with the draft rate study next week, and then a month later they're looking at numbers that are completely different from what was in that draft report, that's going to be embarrassing and awkward for the City Council.
So I don't view the total amount to be any differences in the total amount. It's how they're distributed across between the two funds. So like I said, it's which pocket do you take the money. The total amount is, in the illustrated example of SRF funding, is $180 per month, let's say. If we're going with the strict interpretation of the city attorney is all of that, except for about $35 a month, can be on the sewer rate, but the portion that is more related to water supply needs to be on the water rate.
Oh, go ahead.
All due respect, I think, though, to our citizens, won't it matter which side it's coming from? I mean, understandably, the total amount is going to come from somewhere, but for our citizens on a fixed income, won't it make a difference on their Prop 218 vote and those kinds of things? And won't they want that level of specificity? And won't the city council want to have that level of information?
Yeah, all that needs to be resolved before you send out the Prop 218 notice, because in that notice it's got to specify, as you're saying, the exact dollar amounts of the different types of rates. And, you know, initially we were thinking that was all on sewer, but now we're thinking, hey, from the attorney, it's got to be part sewer, part water. So your Prop 218 notice is going to have a couple of different elements for it. And even within water, there's, you know, it hasn't been finalized exactly how the rates would be recouped if you did it on water, whether it's just escalating the water rates or whether it's a fixed charge or something a little different than that. But but you're right, all this needs to be finalized. I mean, it's got a pretty short calendar to resolve all this and finalize it all before you can put it on your Prop 218 notice. But that's got to be when you put what the maximums are, the actual numbers.
So if I may, given the lack of a chance for CFAC to review the physical study itself, part of the idea was to actually have this be a joint meeting with the
WRF-CAC.
With WRF-CAC, exactly. So looking up at the calendar, sorry, Bart, but if you look at the third meeting down there on May 2nd is the WRF Citizens Advisory Committee meeting. An option could be to hold a joint meeting with them, with CFAC to join up for this item as well, pending availability, of course. I know it's not ideal, but that would be a good option to hopefully get that study, allow you as an advisory body the time to go through and kind of vet some of the things that we're talking about right now, and then provide that collectively in written format, if you'd like, to City Council. So that is an option.
And we'll discuss that in a second. I think John's point was well taken. The City Council meeting, if that's agendized for April 25th, all we can do in the interim as committee members is comment on whenever we see that study. But I like that suggestion because we also have a conflict with our regular May 16th meeting of this committee, which conflicts with presumably the Amgen tour, so we may have to shift that meeting anyways, and maybe that would be the way to do it.
Certainly. One of the things to also consider is City Council will be considering the draft study. This isn't the final. Certainly it has a chance to change, and hopefully that doesn't swing too much. And that's why we're going through our due diligence right now to hopefully make sure that does not happen. So when those actual Prop 218 numbers come out, that you've got to call out year over year what you'd be approving. If it's a multi-year, we'd have those fully fleshed out and ironed out.
Okay, so I guess the first question is we should get back to Craig on whether we can meet, if you want to do a joint, if everybody would agree on a joint meeting May 2nd with the Water Reclamation Facility. That's the first Tuesday of the month, 3 o'clock, same location, and we would have the rate study then. And
would that be 3 o'clock or 3:30?
No, it's 3 o'clock always, the WRF meeting here. Mm-hmm.
Could they be open to, is that okay for you?
Okay, so we'll get back to you if we can do that.
But
Do we need all 7 of us?
No, we need a quorum, which would be 4. So let's think about that. That's a possibility so as not to belabor this. But we will get you comments individually to Craig as soon as we can after we receive the draft full rate study. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. And then we will also, as Walter suggested, have the opportunity to attend the City Council meeting if we have that study in time to give some comments to them verbally as citizens. Okay?
So, Barbara, just so I'm clear, we'll have the rate study before the City Council meeting?
We don't know that for a fact.
Right,
so
okay.
When we get that, we respond as soon as we can. I was ideally asking for a week because I figured it would be more than a 4-page summary. So,
But we would
if we
think
don't
at
have
the-
it, we will have it presumably in time for the May 2nd meeting.
Okay, but at the latest, we should have it on the 25th because that's when the city council will have it? Is that
Again, unless
fair?
there's any legal
I guess
issue or
so.
something that they defer. I mean, that's out of
What I
our
was
control.
thinking is that if it were to come out on the 25th for the city council meeting,
Mm-hmm.
we might have enough time to read it and then come in and weigh in on it.
Right,
Verbally
verbally.
during public comment.
Okay.
But, I would like to see if the WRF would be open to meeting at 3:30 because we have working members, folks who work and it might make it easier for our members of our committee to attend if they could move that to that 3:30 start time.
I think we could structure the meeting such that we took care of some WRF-only business, took a recess, and then convened a joint meeting at 3:30.
Walter, I'm always hesitant if you have a regular meeting for years at the same time and location. Sometimes it confuses, but I like Rob's suggestion. I think that's a nice compromise, and then put the joint on at 3:30 or later. So, okay.
Do we have 4 people that could attend and we could just make a decision?
I'm there.
I'm available.
I'll be there.
I'm not sure.
Okay, so 3, 4. We got it.
We have a quorum. So the rest of us, if we can show up, we'll get back to you and let you know. Okay. But we'll plan on a joint meeting? Is that what we're saying?
Assuming,
to clarify?
the chair of
It
the
sounds like we have a quorum, so we could notice it as a joint meeting.
Assuming the chair of the WRF agrees. I mean, we're trying to do this up here, so on the fly, so. But yes,
Certainly, and you can
appears-
actually advertise that as a joint meeting for one specific item or the whole meeting in case you
Okay.
can't get a quorum till a little bit later or something like that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so will that conclude the discussion on this item? All right, thank you. And then, Craig, what I'm going to have to ask you is, I don't think there's sufficient time. We have another meeting. That's why I was trying to... Right, okay. So therefore, thank you. Items B2 and B3 will have to be deferred to a later meeting. Okay, I don't think there's anything critical on that. And then, Craig, on if we need a separate meeting in May, in addition to the May 2nd, we'll have to just work through that, see what's on the agenda, and go with that.
And then also send out the notice of cancellation for the standing meeting on the 3rd.
Is everybody in agreement? We don't want to meet the same day the Amgen tour is here? I am. Okay. I think we have a majority there on that.
There we go.
Shall we move that
The regular May, make a motion that the regular May meeting be canceled and or postponed at this time.
What time is Amgen?
It's supposed to,
it's all
the
after.
racers are supposed to arrive between 3:30 and 4,
Oh, okay.
but then it's, after the awards presentation, they're gone. So, I mean, I would entertain a later start so that we can continue with some of this business that we've started. We have some important business from the financial auditor's report. I mean, I'd be open to meeting on the 16th if we could meet at, like say 4:30 or even 4.
I would be open to a later meeting. Or if we
Let's
need-
find out what the time, I want to get the time on that and see what other members, send your comments to Craig, and maybe if we can get a quorum, and I'm not convinced those of us volunteering would be done at 3:30 or 4 based on any previous one, but we need to move on, so we'll
As a
have to.
volunteer coordinator, once the race passes by, you're free.
I understand, but it's a big activity for the town.
We need to check on the calendaring
Yeah.
for the Amgen event as well. This may be booked out until a little bit later in the afternoon for cleanup or debriefing or something like that. So I know they're looking at the incident action plan this Friday.
Okay.
So hopefully we should have more information in a few days.
Okay. Or maybe we'll schedule it another day. We'll work on it. Okay, I think that's it. Future agenda items to be determined based on what we didn't complete today and in the future. But we will meet May 2nd, if noticed, as a joint meeting in this location at 3 o'clock, if you can make it, or whatever Craig sends us after that time-wise. Okay? Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you for the presentations. Meeting adjourned.